I am Vero, and you're watching Modern Immigrant. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Modern Immigrant. As always, we're here on a Monday sharing an amazing story about immigration. And today, we also have a specialist that's going to be sharing her knowledge, and it's going to be uplifting us all, especially if you are a non-native English speaker. This episode is for you. So, Melissa Chapman is with us today in today's episode. Melissa is an English language coach, and we're gonna learn what that means. She is on a mission, as she says, to uplift, celebrate, and empower non-native English speakers. So I learned so much about language, how we learn a language, how we can gain some more confidence, and how the way we present to the world is actually how the world is gonna see us. This episode was really special because I have been struggling a lot with speaking English and gaining confidence and feeling okay when I make mistakes. So I really enjoyed this episode, and Melissa shared amazing resources like a TED Talk, an amazing article that talks about why doesn't she love the concept of fluency, and we're going to be talking about that. And also you will find all those links in this episode description, as well as the way to connect with Melissa that has amazing courses that you can learn from her, and she even has one-on-one individual coach sessions. So I encourage you to check it out and to reach out to Melissa. And before we begin with the interview and you get to learn from Melissa, I want to remind you that we are here every Monday with episodes. Some Mondays are in English and some Mondays are in Spanish. I also want to tell you that you can check out the work that we do at Modern Immigrant in our Instagram at Modern Immigrant, and also our website, modernimmigrant.net. I also have amazing news, and it's that Modern Immigrant is growing and we're becoming a little more than a podcast. We're becoming a community, and we want to support immigrants and immigrants' causes with many different ways. So please check out mi.immigrationisgood, because you do not want to miss the work that we're going to be doing there. And I can't wait to share more about Immigration is Good with all of you. So check those out, and always welcome to receive your questions, your doubts, and if you want to be a guest, you can send me a message on Instagram. You can reach out to us through our website, modernimmigrant.net. Thank you one more time for being here. Bye. Melissa, welcome to Modern Immigrant. I'm so excited that you're here with us, and I'm excited that this kind of special episode came to life. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes, me too as well. I've been so excited about having this conversation, and yeah, I can't wait to share all of this information with your listeners.
Yeah, and I feel that it's exciting when we have the opportunity to meet prior to the interview, as we did, because it gives us that opportunity to know how it's gonna be. And I wrote down so many questions and so many topics that I want to explore. But I do want to start kind of like I start every single interview with asking you what have been your immigration journey or story, because I know that connects to what we're going to talk about in just a little bit.
Yes, absolutely, right. So my story with immigration isn't the familiar one, I guess, that maybe most of your guests have shared, because my time abroad has always been rather short-term. So I am American, and I've lived most of my life in the United States, but I have a huge love affair with France.
Who doesn't, right?
Over the last 2 decades, I've spent considerable time going back and forth to France, and I just love being there as much as possible on my American passport. But my experiences living abroad began as a college student in 1997. And I took a couple of French classes at my university because they were required. And one day the director of the Paris program came in, and she explained that if we wanted, we could study in Paris. And this idea really intrigued me. And it was quite interesting that this intrigued me, because I came from a home environment where travel didn't happen. I lived in a really white community. It was not very diverse. We didn't hear very many languages being spoken. People who traveled did so for a tropical vacation, not for this culturally immersive experience. But there was something inside of me that got really intrigued about this idea. So I decided, yes, this is going to be a great opportunity. I'm going to spend a semester in Paris. And I'll tell you, when I first arrived, I was a very scared 20-year-old.
Of course.
Who had no idea what I was in for.
Yeah.
And it was quite difficult at first. At first, I was unhappy, to be honest. Everything was so different, and I was so uncomfortable and so out of my comfort zone that I was resisting it, and I actually tried to go home within that first month.
Really?
Yes. And my mother said, you can't come home because we spent all this money to send you there. So you need to stay and figure this out. And also my university would not allow me to re-enroll in for that semester. So I was like, okay, I've just got to figure out how to make this work. And thank God that I was in that position, because that semester abroad, I believe, it changed the course of my life, and impacted me so powerfully to this day.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I feel like you're reading like a very cool story that I can't wait to learn more about. I think it was really interesting how you say that traveling and living abroad wasn't a thing that you grew up with, because you're right, like a lot of the interviews I have had, we do explore immigration, and there's always some sort of like a connection, right? There's always a parent, a family member, a friend, someone that also did it, that inspire that person to also explore that path. So I think it is really amazing for the listeners that haven't had that experience with immigration, to know that it can also be an opportunity for them if they feel that desire to go and live abroad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I truly believe in trusting your intuition. And I have found throughout my life that when I listen to whatever is inside of me that's like telling me, this is right, this feels good, this is something you need to do.
Yes.
I'm greatly rewarded when I follow that.
I love that.
So yeah, that is truly, like, I would say, my first experience of just really listening to my intuition and saying, I don't know what's over there, but something is calling me.
Yes.
And I need to go.
And I think this would take us perfectly to the next question, which is, I want to know what an English language coach is, but I do want to know how that experience of living abroad took you to that career path.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, during that first semester that I studied abroad, I went from having a really moderate interest and curiosity about speaking French to this very, very strong desire to speak the language as much as I could. And if anyone has been to Paris and isn't a native French speaker, you'll know that once they detect an accent, they're going to typically start responding to you in English. And that really began to bother me. And I started taking it personally. I started feeling like, they don't think that I can communicate very well, so they're compensating for me. And I was really starting to harbor some kind of negative emotions toward that response. And to top it off, I had an unfortunate situation happen that really tainted how I felt about speaking French. And what happened was, I asked a stranger on the street who was Parisian for directions, and I asked her in French. And when she responded to me, she just looked at me with disgust and said, "I'd rather not hear you speak and ruin our beautiful language."
No way.
I was just so devastated. I mean, she was an older woman.
Yeah.
This is 23 years ago, so I don't remember, specifically what she looks like. But when you're young and impressionable, anybody that's older than you who makes a comment like that is going to really have a strong impression.
And when you're trying to do your best too, like it takes so much courage to like ask for something in a second language when you're learning it, when you're living abroad. Like, and I understand that not everyone has to understand this, but still.
Yeah. It takes an incredible amount of courage to speak another language, and to have a native speaker have such a negative reaction to you trying your best it's heartbreaking. And that's really how I felt. And so what ended up happening was, after that situation, I became really fixated on wanting to speak French right all the time.
Yeah.
And what followed was almost a 2-decade obsession of wanting to speak French as good as I can, so that I felt like I fit in. And I felt like I was, part of the culture, and that I belonged there. And so I've taken many different short vacations back and forth, but I've had a couple other really impactful experiences. One was in 2008. I returned for 3 months, and I lived with 2 different French families so that I could be immersed in the language and experience day-to-day French life. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, I was just thrown into all of it.
That's amazing. You had a good, positive experience with that. That's awesome.
And my language skills skyrocketed, and I was feeling so good in French. But what I noticed was I hated being corrected. It was like, so if somebody corrected me, they were pointing out this flaw, and that felt so personal to me. And I loved being complimented.
Yeah, no, yes, I 100% feel like you. And when you were telling this, I was actually kind of thinking that now that you're going to talk about the coaching, but like, how can we do, like, we want to get better at the language, but we don't want to get correct all the time. Isn't it like a hard kind of balance? Because I don't like it either, but I do understand when people do it. And sometimes I do say, oh, thank you for pointing that out so I can stop doing that, because I have been doing it all the time. But it's kind of like a hard balance, right? Because you do want to feel like you fit in. You don't want people to all the time acknowledge that you're learning the language because you feel like you're already advanced, kind of. But you're not. I don't know. It's kind of tricky.
Yeah, so it's really about neutralizing that experience. So not making it mean anything about you, which is one of the things that we explore in my coaching practice, is what are you making that mean about you? If you are feeling really triggered into negative emotions by a particular situation, such as being corrected by others, what are the thoughts that you're telling yourself? Because there's an internal reaction that you're having, and some people get corrected and they don't care. They're like, "That great, like you said, thank you for letting me know. I didn't realize I was doing that. This is such good information.
So helpful. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah."
And you look at it from a really neutral perspective.
Okay.
That's one of the biggest things that I've learned.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little more what you do for work and what it means to be a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I started off as an ESL teacher, English as a second language. I was doing that as volunteer work off and on for about a dozen years. I got certified as an ESL teacher, and I did some paid teaching work. And I found that there were some things that just didn't really feel good for me in the traditional language learning classroom. And it was this hierarchy that exists between the teacher and the students, that the teacher is somewhat higher and the students are lower. And I didn't like how that felt. I didn't like that students were looking to me as this keeper of all the information and all the knowledge, and that I needed to transfer it into their head. And I also felt like the language learning classroom is outdated. It doesn't look at the learner as a unique individual person who shows up as a human. It's textbook based, where you're required to teach things that some people may already know in the classroom. And so they're left feeling bored. And then inevitably there are other people who are, maybe not feeling as comfortable with the material, and they might be struggling with that exact same material. And you're trying to teach across all these, mini levels that's supposed to be in a one-level classroom.
Which is impossible.
It's impossible, and you're not really meeting people's needs. And, I believe that when you show up and you want to communicate in another language, you're showing up as a whole person. There's more to this than just gaining the knowledge. There's emotions that come up.
Yes.
And so I realized that for me, what I wanted to do was to coach individuals. And there are some key differences between teaching and coaching. And so when we coach, the coach and the client are on the exact same level. There's no one who knows more or who's better than the other one. We're on the exact same level. And it's all about the individual as a learner and what they specifically need, and empowering them to get that information. So it may not be that I share, all the insights that this person needs to know, but I help them discover the insights.
It almost seems like you understand that person that's coming into you has a past and has previous knowledge and has previous experience, versus in a classroom setting, it almost seems like you don't know anything. You're on level 1. This is all the stuff you have to know or have to learn, right? So how interesting that you understand this person as a whole. And yeah, I think that's wonderful, because it is more than just learning a language, I feel, when you are learning a language.
Yeah. And one of the biggest struggles that I experienced as a French learner was feeling confident. And I would go back to my French teachers and say, I don't feel good. This isn't good enough. I'm not doing good. I'm not, speaking well enough. And the response to that is typically, you're doing great. You should feel good about yourself. What's wrong? Like, everything's fine. And the problem is that telling somebody how they should feel doesn't change how they feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's just one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last couple of years. That it was like, oh, that's why I would strive to get all of these compliments. And the compliments would feel good in the moment, but they never changed how I felt on the inside.
Because you don't believe it. You're like,
right.
But really? And I think this is something that a lot of immigrants that I have interviewed and that I know and that I speak with, we struggle with, and I include myself in this, we struggle with that confidence. Even though everyone's telling us, I understand you fine. But then there's like another side of those negative experiences, right? The people that didn't understand us, the people that correct us, maybe not saying that's a negative experience, but those experiences where you're like, oh, I sometimes forget that people can sense an accent, or I sometimes forget that people would know that I'm not from here, and I'm quoting, right? Like just quoting here. But what's an advice, now that we're talking about confidence, what's something that you can give us to us that have struggled, because you also felt that way and now you're a professional and now you help others with this, because I do know that this can affect us in so many different areas, right? And I think we talked about this briefly when we first met, like finding a partner, getting a job, like this confidence. And I guess I'm talking about this because I want people to know that this is something that affects us a lot. Like, it's not just a thing that, oh no, you're fine, as you said, you're fine, go on, go get a job, go to an interview. No, it really affects the way you're going to present yourself, and your emotions and your mental health even. So yeah, I would just love to hear a little more on that effect and how can we kind of overcome that. I know it takes work, but I would love to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, when you believe in yourself, the world treats you differently.
Yeah.
And as you said, you can show up to an interview and be insecure, and they're going to sense that energy. They're going to sense that you're insecure. But you can show up to an interview knowing that you speak imperfect English and that maybe you might make some mistakes, and you can also be confident and feel good about yourself. And I'll get to some advice in a moment, but I just want to mention, a lot of the language learning industry, there's a lot of people who do focus on confidence in the language learning industry. Okay. And I believe that the traditional solution is to practice more, learn more, and study harder. And I think that, of course, gaining more knowledge, so for example, knowing the appropriate vocabulary when you go into an interview, or culturally what's acceptable, that does help your confidence. But it's not the only thing that helps your confidence, right? Because we need to really look at what's happening inside. So,
that makes sense.
In terms of some advice,
I know I move a little ahead. It was just the perfect moment. It was the perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So anxiety can be a huge issue, especially in social situations, applying for jobs, and it results in people settling for lower paying jobs or remaining in a job that they don't like, or really just not having the social life that they want to have. So I want to flip something on its head, because what's happening is that this person is going into the situation believing that there's a problem.
Yeah.
But what if being a non-native English speaker wasn't a problem? What if we could shift your mindset?
What if that was a good thing, right? What if you believe that walking in this room knowing that you're not a native speaker will give you more opportunities because you're not, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. What if it's an asset? The fact that you're bilingual or multilingual, maybe that's exactly what that employer is seeking. Maybe that's exactly what your ideal partner wants. They're intrigued by other countries and cultures and languages, and they'd be thrilled to date somebody who's not American, for example, those of us living in the U.S. We have to kind of flip how we first view these things. And my advice, would be to give yourself permission to make mistakes.
Yes, that's huge.
You can give yourself permission to be an imperfect English speaker, regardless of how many years you've been studying or speaking English.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I like to remind people of is, what you can do now is something that you wished that you could do 6 months ago, or maybe even 6 years ago. But it gets forgotten because we can get so fixated on what we don't know yet, or what we still can't do. those things will come. They're going to come with time. And if you shift your mindset about how you show up doing those things, you show up from a place of, I'm an asset, I'm worthy, I'm a valuable employee. Things are going to change for you in terms of acquiring that additional knowledge that you want. But really take some time to reflect on the key moments that you've had along the way. When was the first time, maybe like moving to another country was a huge milestone. When did you start being able to have conversations with people? Like that was a huge one for me. I mean, that felt amazing for me when I could express myself and, with more than just basic sentences, but actually share my thoughts and feelings.
Have a deep conversation, understand a movie that you're watching in another language and be like, I got it, or read a book, right? Like those, I love that. Like focusing on those moments.
Yeah. So shifting away from what you can't do to what you can do. There's always going to be something that you won't know, even in your first language.
True.
Because language is always evolving. It's constantly changing. And linguists simply have put rules in place, especially in the case of the English language, to make some structure of the language, but there's a lot of things that don't make sense in English.
Exactly. And now that you're saying this, I do want to share that a few months ago, and this is like an example of how we don't know everything in our first language either. I always share on my Instagram account for the podcast the content both in English and in Spanish. And I'm always so obsessed with the English piece. Like I review it, I ask my husband to read it, make sure I don't have any mistakes, right? Like it's almost like this huge deal if I make a mistake in English. And when I write in Spanish, I'm like, that's easy, right? This is the language I know. And it was interesting how a family member that was really close to me made a comment on something I wrote in Spanish in a really nice way. She was like, people keep saying this phrase, but it's not grammatically correct. And to me, that was almost like a positive thing, because I was like, see? And this is your language. Like I moved to the US as an adult, right? Like just for people to understand. It wasn't like, I learned Spanish when I was a kid and I never spoke it again. No, that's my first language. And I still make mistakes. And I feel 100% confident. And I show up when I have to speak Spanish 100% confident. And I'm still making mistakes, which is normal. I guess the overall is exactly what you're saying. We are going to make mistakes in any language. Your first one, your second one. It's really more about the way you feel around it.
Exactly, right. Because it's so interesting that you said, when you write it in Spanish, you're not so focused on whether or not you make a mistake, because it's almost like you have this pass where it's, oh, well, if she makes a mistake, no big deal. Like, she's a native speaker. But if you make a mistake in English, oh, we're pointing out that you're a non-native English speaker and you made a mistake. But maybe that doesn't need to feel so bad,
That's what I was gonna sorry to interrupt you, but that's exactly when we're saying that it touches on feelings and emotions. Why I didn't care about someone correcting me in Spanish, but I do care when someone corrects me in English, right? And this is just for the listeners to have an idea if they have felt this way, because what's beneath that is, well, you're not from here. Oh, that's another reason for people to understand that I don't know enough or that I'm not good enough in English, right? So I just think it's interesting how we feel about it.
Yes, absolutely. And that self-awareness is so important, that you can go down to the multiple layers and say, where is this coming from?
What is this really about?
Yeah.
I will say everywhere to ask that question. And I want to go back to the amazing process that you briefly mentioned when we first met about how we learn a language, because I know a lot of people want to learn a second language. They feel that maybe it's already too late for them. So I would love for you to kind of walk us through that process? I know it might get too technical, but just for us to understand, how does our brain work when we're learning a second language, and what's the recommendation in terms of ages as well on learning?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So in my education as a coach, I'm a trained neuro-language coach, which means that I got certified to be this type of coach, where we learn a little bit about neuroscience and we couple that with the coaching principles in order to support our learners. So I find that the scientific aspect can be really useful for second language learners to understand, because it also neutralizes some of these negative feelings. So our brains are an electrical machine that contain a map of neurons. And the neurons are the cells in your brain which receive and send information about your body through electrical signals. And this is how it interprets everything that's going on in your world.
Okay.
So from the ages of 0 to about 7 or 8, you were absorbing as much information as you possibly could in order to form neural connections in your brain that create a map.
Okay.
And once you've established this map, and all these connections, your brain functions automatically. Your brain loves habit, and it loves to make things as easy for you as possible. So that's why it's working on absorbing everything subconsciously when you're young. When you turned about 7 or 8, you begin to develop this rational and analytical part of your brain. And at that point, the way that you learn changes. So instead of just absorbing everything immediately to your subconscious, you learn by making associations to what you already know. Okay, so that's how you still learn today. So when you take in new information, like a new vocabulary word, your brain is already looking for the existing information to connect it to. And if it doesn't exist, then it has to create a new neural pathway. So there's a lot going on in the brain. Now, even though you're learning differently after the age of 8, it doesn't mean that you can't learn another language or multiple languages. It's just different the way that you learn. And the conditions are so different too, from when you learned your native language as a child and learning a language as a young adult or an older adult. I like to encourage my clients to remember, you were not born knowing how to speak.
That's amazing.
You couldn't speak. You learned by mimicking people. You learned by watching the older people around you and then making the sounds that they were making.
Right.
And you had a lot of encouragement along the way. You had, hopefully some encouraging adults in your life who celebrated every time you learned a new word and who reaffirmed that new word over and over and over again for you and gave you lots of praise, and they weren't judging you. They were excited for you.
Let's be that person for those that are learning another language. Yeah. But I do love that you say, because I keep saying that when you learn a language after the age of 7, I actually thought it was a little later, but if you learn a language after the age of 7, as you're saying, I always would say, oh, it's more difficult. And I love that you say it's different. The process will be different. That just shifts everything. It doesn't have to be difficult, impossible, because then we're telling that to ourselves, and then when we're trying to learn it, we're like, see, it's so difficult because I'm already whatever age, because I'm already an adult, because I'm already, and I just think it's great that you said that, and that for all of us to see your example and my example as, you can do it, even, at an older age. So, yeah.
And I completely agree with the words that you tell yourself, that when you say this is going to be difficult, yes, it will be difficult.
100%.
But what if it gets to be easy? What if it gets to feel easy? What if it gets to feel good? One a coach and mentor that I look up to, talks about how there are different paradigms in the world, and most of us subscribe to this paradigm that things are hard, things that we want come to us, that we really want, they have to be hard to get. But we can subscribe to another paradigm that it's going to be easy.
Yes.
And it's going to feel good.
I love that. I love that. That really changes everything. And I also want to ask you, there's an amazing topic and conversation around the fluency of a language and acquiring fluency. And I'm going to link in this video or audio, if you're listening, the article that you sent me, because I think it was really interesting, and it's something that I really never thought about before. So I would love for you to kind of share with the listeners, why don't you love the concept of being fluent in a language? And what's the impact that that can have to the ones that are trying to learn a language? And it kind of feels like we never reach that level. It's like too high. It's almost native level. For us to understand a little better. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I think fluency is a confusing and unhelpful destination to strive for, because it's very subjective, which means each person's idea of what fluent is completely different. There doesn't seem to be one universal definition of when you've reached fluency. And I think it's become this gold standard that everyone is just striving to achieve, but you don't know
never get there
when you're there.
Exactly. Because it's not clear. Like, now that you're saying this, I'm trying to ask myself, what do I think fluency means? And to me, it kind of means that you don't make mistakes, that you don't have an accent, that people can notice that you learn this language later on in life. And it's like, wait a second, is that what it means? I don't know. Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And when you have a definition like that, then you're never going to be fluent, and then you're always going to feel bad about yourself.
Exactly.
And I find like this is really painful for people who are perfectionists in particular, which is something that I was struggling with as well in French. And I've met many non-native English speakers who, I thought in my head, I get kind of categorized them as fluent. And then they made a comment that like, oh, I'm not fluent yet though.
And you'll be like, if they're not fluent, what about me?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They still have these feelings of self-doubt and insecurity when me as a native English speaker think, you're doing amazing.
Right.
You sound amazing. So I don't like to focus on fluency as the ultimate goal. I think that we need to be looking at how we feel, which is a desire. I think we all just want to feel natural and authentic when we're speaking.
Yes.
And if you can show up and communicate authentically and feel like yourself, then I think that's what most language learners desire.
I love that. When you're finally relaxed and you're making the jokes that you like and you're sharing the things that you want without actually going through the whole process, like you can tell when someone's tense about the language they're speaking because they don't feel confident, and how that changes everything. And I think we talked about it before when we said the way you present yourself, right? So that's the way you feel as well. So I love to see that as a goal because it seems more realistic. It seems that I can achieve that versus perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a French language teacher, an online French language teacher, and she likes to use the word fluid, to speak the language and feel fluid in the language, so, and I think that feels a lot nicer.
I like that. Yeah. And I know when we were talking about the way, I forgot to ask you something that I always hear, and I don't know if it's true or if it's, I don't know, a myth. So when we're learning a language, you kind of told us all the stuff that's going on in our brains and the connections that we're making, and kind of like how are we reshaping, in a way, our brain. I keep hearing that when you are speaking a language, you behave, we talk about that, you behave a certain way. And they say that when you switch languages, or when you speak two languages, you have two personalities, or your personalities are different. Is this real, or this is kind of connected to the confidence we were talking about? I just feel curious about it.
Yes. So our personalities do change when we speak another language, because you think differently in another language. And I recently saw this amazing TED Talk that I would love to share with your listeners.
Yes.
By a cognitive scientist in the field of language, and her name is Lyra Boroditsky.
Okay.
Hopefully I'm saying her name correctly.
Yeah.
And she talks specifically about that. And there was, some examples that she gave that really hit home for me. So she said that in English, if somebody tipped over a vase and it broke, we would say he broke the vase. But if it were in Spanish, somebody might say the vase broke, or the vase broke itself.
Yes.
And it gives it it's a whole different meaning about what occurred.
Yeah.
And the other thing that she mentioned is that languages that assign a gender to nouns will describe the noun differently based on whether it's a masculine or a feminine word.
That happens in Spanish all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so she gave this amazing example of the word bridge in German is feminine. So it's described with very stereotypically feminine words, whereas in Spanish it's masculine, and a bridge would be described in a more masculine sense.
How crazy.
And, anecdotally for myself, I've noticed that my personality changes when I'm speaking French. I find that my mannerisms will shift to mirror how a French person would interact. I'm kind of like mimicking the way that they speak. So I feel like my voice sounds a bit more sing-songy, as we say in English. I don't know how to better explain that, but just like really flowy.
Like a music.
With a lot of ups and downs.
I love that. Yeah.
And I feel like I start thinking about life from the perspective of the French person. So I definitely notice I see a difference in myself.
I love it.
But it has, it's totally true that our personalities change.
I want to watch that TED Talk, and I will add it. If you can send it to me, I will add it to this description too. I think it's a really cool topic, and I do think that the way we speak, I was just kind of trying to remember some examples in Spanish, but I can't come up with like one right now. But sometimes we put the weight on the action, as you were saying, on the person or the thing. So that changes everything. Like, did I break it, or it broke by itself, right? Little things like that. I feel like in English, I can be way more direct than I am in Spanish, right? Like I can go more to the point, because it might be something also about the culture, right? So, and when I speak in Spanish, maybe I use more words, maybe I go around, maybe just the way you move, you also like your hands, your face, like, I think it's a really cool topic. And let's see, I still have a few more things, and I know we're getting to the end, but there's two things I kind of want to ask you. And one is if our first language can be impacted by the fact that we're learning a second one. And I think this is something I encounter, I wouldn't say it's like an issue, because I haven't forgotten how to speak Spanish, and I don't think that would happen because I do practice it pretty often. But I do see that sometimes I have a hard time remembering a word in Spanish, or I will use an English one, like the famous Spanglish, I guess. I do it all the time, and for some people that's a no. Other people are more relaxed about it. So I just want to hear your professional kind of opinion on that, going back and forth, because you're doing a lot in your brain when you're kind of switching.
Yes, absolutely. So, the brain is really fascinating, and it wants to be as efficient as possible, which is why we have that established map. The nice thing about that map is that it can change, and we can develop new neural connections. And this is something called neuroplasticity, okay? The ability for the brain to change. So we have these small gaps in between the neurons that are called synapses. And in these synapses, that's where communication occurs. And when we stop doing something, the brain wants to trim away at those things that we're no longer doing. Yes. So this is just so fascinating. But while we sleep, the brain fills with cranial sacral fluid and literally washes away what we're not using.
No way.
Yes. So, I mean, it makes perfect sense that if you're not speaking your first language on a regular basis, your brain it just wants to be efficient. So it's like, okay, I'm using this other language now, and I don't need that anymore.
Okay, I need to show this to my mom so she doesn't get mad at me when I'm talking to her. And I'm like, how do you say that? And she's like, come on.
There's a scientific explanation.
Okay.
And when you're speaking another language consistently, the brain suppresses all the other languages that you speak. So it completely makes sense that, some words you may forget from time to time. And it doesn't need to mean anything about you and your abilities or who you are as, from whatever culture you come from. This is just your brain being your friend.
Exactly. It's like a muscle almost. Like if you stop using that muscle when you go back to exercise it, it's going to take a little time to get back to that strength. So I think it's really important, as you said, this is not you. It's not about the person, not being, attached to the culture or not caring. It's really, it has a scientific explanation, and it's, as you said, I love that you said it's our brain being our friend, protecting us kind of to the things that we do need. I love the way you explained it too. that was great.
It's so helpful to know that, to
definitely
know exactly what's going on.
I feel better.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I'm glad.
And Melissa, I also want to know about the services that you provide to others, about the courses. I know I am gonna take some of them that I haven't, but I'm really excited to do it, and I want you to share with the listeners what can they encounter in your courses, or if they want to do a one-on-one, like how would that work with you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm really passionate about helping non-native speakers break their patterns of self-doubt and criticism and second-guessing their words, and really moving into a place where they have the life of their dreams. And so the way that I do that is there's 3 different ways that you can work on this. Okay. One is my Speak English with Confidence mini course, which is a 5-day recorded course, 5 trainings, comes with a workbook. And it's very easy to purchase it online. And it really just it walks you through some of these invisible barriers that are keeping you from showing up as a confident English speaker. Right. And I also have a few different bonuses that are included with this mini course. So I'd love to share that link with your listeners.
Yes, thank you.
And I also offer a group coaching program called Speak to Be Me, where we, dive deeper into all of the issues that you're experiencing in terms of showing up as a confident speaker. And, we really take quite a deep look at what is the root cause for why you're feeling this discomfort. And you learn how to neutralize all of those emotions so that you can show up as a confident speaker and have healthier habits as a second language speaker. And then finally, I do offer private coaching as well, one-to-one coaching, which is a beautiful, supportive space where I meet weekly with my clients. And then I also support them in between sessions. We leave each other voice messages. It's a really great space so that my clients never feel alone. Because I know that it's easy to feel like you're alone in this. So I'd love to just provide as much support as possible.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa. And before we say goodbye, I do want to bring an important topic that I remember you share about this with one. You told me a little bit about one of your clients, and I do want to share with people that, and I don't know if you agree, but it doesn't matter for how long you have been speaking English. It doesn't matter for how long you have been living in the US, if that's your case. That does not mean that you already have the confidence. It does not mean that because you have too many years living abroad, then you shouldn't be feeling the way you're feeling. Because that's something that I have a struggle with, and I want people that are listening to feel okay with that and to reach out for help if they want to reach out to you or someone else, another coach, because it's really not a matter of time. And I don't know if you agree with this. It's not a matter of, oh, but you have been in the US for 10 years. Come on, you should be already fluent. No, it's really not.
No, it's not a matter of time. Absolutely. It's more about what's happening internally.
Yeah.
And the client that I was that I mentioned to you had been living in the U.S. for 15 years, and she was functioning what appeared on the outside to be highly successful. Yet she was feeling really anxious and stressed in English. So it really doesn't matter how long you've been here. What I find is that people say, I should be fluent by now. That is one of the biggest things that I hear. I've been living here for, X number of years. I've been speaking the language for this many years. And there's this expectation, this really high expectation that they place on themselves.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to, what are you making this mean about you?
Exactly.
And what emotions are you attaching to this situation?
Yeah, I love that, and I think this has been really a favorite episode, and one that I'm gonna enjoy listening and re-listening because, it's something I can relate to, and it's something that I know a lot of people that listen to the podcast will relate to and will find comfort as well. So thank you so much, Melissa.
Yes. Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited to help your listeners, and I'm excited that I could give you some insight, and I'm glad that you have some more knowledge you can go to your mother with.
Yes, exactly.
So you would let her know what's really happening in our brain.
Yeah, thank you so much one more time, and we'll be connected then.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
You too.